when you're talking about the brain and all the, I mean, you mentioned it last night, and this had me thinking. It's like, when you think how all that works, I have to take an aside and say, how could that happen in nature is without a creator?
Yeah. So, well, here's the thing. I mean, we know that the programs, meaning genes, so genes, DNA, and there's DNA, then there's RNA, and then there's proteins. And proteins are the action end of the game where they say, hey, like grow over here, don't grow over there, mm-hmm. Become this kind of cell, dopamine cell or a serotonin cell. We know that those mechanisms are incredibly well conserved from mice to humans. Now, mm-hmm. certain things happen in the human brain that you don't see in other species, like the elaboration of the parts of the brain that are involved in context and planning, mm-hmm. especially. But the memory systems, the ones that control hormones, breathing, heart rate, they're very similar. Mm. Not exactly the same, but very similar.
Okay.
When you start to study and understand brain development, as I did, or neuroplasticity, or dopamine, you have to, meaning I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow. Now, then of course there's this difference among scientists as to who believes in God, who mm-hmm. doesn't. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying it. I believe in God. I do. Mm-hmm. I think there are many things that science can explain. Mm-hmm. There are certain things science can't explain, but I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. And I'm not the first scientist to say this. I mean, mm-hmm. Einstein believed in God. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists ever, clearly believed in God. There are many atheist scientists. There are agnostic scientists who are just kind of like unsure, right? Mm-hmm. And, for me, I'm in absolute awe of biology. Mm-hmm. It's just incredible that we're sitting here having this conversation. It's with language, that there are little sound waves that you're perceiving and understanding. I mean, it's just, and I think the brain represents the apex of incredible in terms of biology. Like the heart is interesting, the immune system is interesting, the liver is interesting, but the brain is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the number of different ways you can move your body compared to another species. Mm-hmm. Think about what you did today. Think about what I was attempting to do today, right?
Yeah.
Spectacular. Think about technology, these lights, the, Tesla cars, spaceships. I mean, the internet, I mean, unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And yet, oh, so real.
Yeah.
So, we could talk a bit about how well, I'll just say this. Secretly, I've always prayed. I grew up in a split religion home. My mm-hmm. family's like the UN. We've got people from Guatemala, Denmark, Argentina, New York. Like all the different political battles are in my family. Super left, super right, libertarians, mm-hmm. lefties to the, it's crazy. Thanksgivings can be difficult.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, I absolutely pray. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that the idea, but also what for me is really a deep belief, which is that we can't control everything. We're not in as much control as we think we are. And that the magnificence of biology and the magnificence of nature is, it's impossible for me to conceive how that could come about any other way. It just is. Now, I think that, full stop.
Who do you pray to?
That's an interesting one because I think God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I absolutely do. I've actually started reading the Bible recently, start mm-hmm. to finish. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's my duty to learn and in some sense compare Old and New Testament. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in the stories, but I'm fascinated by the story of us, right? And the story of everything. And so, but yeah, I pray out loud in the morning. Sometimes again in the middle of the night if I wake up. Mm-hmm. And it's only recently that I've been doing this more often.
It's given you peace? Or?
Oh, my goodness. It's given me so much. It's given me peace. And, it's going to sound weird and probably people are going to be like, what are you talking about? If this, it works. Mm-hmm. It works. There's a way in which certain things I was grappling with, I just couldn't resolve. I couldn't do it. And it was all internal, and I just couldn't do it.
How were you trying to resolve these things? Like have an answer?
Yeah, discipline myself. I mean, it wasn't like I was super, undisciplined. I mean, obviously I have a lot of self-discipline, but I always pray, I want to remove my defects of character. I want to, I certainly pray for other people. I mostly, these days I pray for the ability to really harness as much care and love for other people and for myself, something I haven't been that good at in my lifetime, in order to be able to put the best possible work into the world, to really serve. Like I really see myself as serving higher power. Like I'm a conduit.
Right.
And the better I can do that, the better I'm serving. The better I'm serving, the more I feel connected to humanity.
Do you think that with this, I don't know if you've always felt like this. It sounds like it's more of a newer feeling. But
somewhat, although secretly.
Yeah.
Like in Santa Barbara, I'll just say there's this place, Sands Beach, down at the end of the beach, if anyone's ever been there. And I used to run down there once a week. I always did a long run on Sunday, minus a 72-pound rock.
Right.
And I would pray. And I just pray for, be honest with myself, be honest with others.
And that was years ago.
I was 18.
Oh, okay.
19, 20. So, and then, I've seen some hardship along the way. I mean, I would just mention that I've had 3 amazing scientific advisors. Harry shot himself 2 weeks after I told him we published a paper in Science. He said, come on down to Santa Barbara. It'd be great to take you out for pizza and celebrate. 2 weeks later, ate a bullet in the bathtub. Barbara died of cancer when she was 50. I'm friends with her daughter. I, saw her. She did have those 2 kids. One's a neuroscientist.
Oh man.
At McGill, and she was like a mom to me. She died. I was speaking at her memorial, and then my postdoc advisor died. He was a pretty impressive guy in his own right. And so at one point, I'm thinking like, what's going on? I'm the common denominator.
Right.
How am I picking these people? But they were amazing, and I had some friends commit suicide, this kind of thing. And you live long enough, that's going to happen. People are going to go. That's just the reality. But there were times when I'm like, it was dark. It was, like, where am I? Why me? And at those moments too, just accepting that there's a plan and it's happening for a reason. And I don't know what it is. And just putting my trust in that has allowed me to grieve those things properly and to really try and, I got the message, I got the download to take the lessons from them and just not waste a single day and to do things that I really felt mattered. So to me, it's always been linked to, sort of forces greater than me, certainly.
Does it feel like, when hearing all this, does it feel like once you've taken like a more, I don't know, intentional turn for being grateful and praying, you're not drinking since 2019. It seems like that's been in tandem with your success.
Absolutely. I always wanted to have a deeper relationship to God. I always wanted that. And I kind of was like, why don't I have that? Well, duh. That's like saying, I want to be fit. Why I'm not fit? Well, because you're not running, you're not lifting, you're not doing the things. It was like, and it was a couple of different people that kept showing up in my life and they were doing it. And it was like, well, pray. And, I've learned, and I certainly try and do this, that a lot of prayer is about listening. And a lot of prayer is about you ask for things or listen for things. And then an hour later, 2 days later, you go, wait, like it doesn't happen in the moment necessarily, just like fitness. I don't want to compare fitness. I don't want to trivialize prayer by comparing to fitness, but there's some parallels that are relevant. It's
consistent work.
Yeah, it's consistent work. And then all of a sudden, like things come up and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. That makes so much sense. Now, I think that the success of the podcast, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful for it, incredibly grateful. But in many ways, I'm doing exactly what I was doing when I was that 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. I'm learning and sharing. So it was always in me, and it always felt like this energy, this thing. Like it's like, how did I end up like this? How come all the other kids like don't have this? And how come sometimes it feels like a little bit of a not a curse, but kind of a burden. Like, what do I do with this? And the deep satisfaction for me comes from acknowledging this is me. I've always been this way. It's not going to change. And that it's not coming from me. It's coming through me.
Right.
And I just want to do right by it. And I think we talked a little bit.
It's a gift, and you're honoring your gift.
That's right.
Essentially.
Yes. Well,
and I feel like if we're honoring our gifts, we're rewarded.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest rewards recently comes from, and we talked a little bit about this on the mountain today. It's like, for me, the sweet spot that I finally get steady glimpses of is being loving, but also realistic. Like you can be so loving that you lose touch with the reality. Too much trust isn't good either. But you don't want to be unloving to yourself and others, because then you look at the world through cynical lens, and then you're not going to be doing your best work. So for me, it's all about being loving, but realistic. And I think prayer helps me arrive there. It does many, many other things. I also just feel like our time here is limited, and I've been so blessed by people that have come along. I mean, those academic mentors meant everything to me, but so did the academic mentors that I didn't work for directly that helped me along. So did the high school football coach that taught me how to lift. So did Lex Friedman, you, Joe Rogan, right? Rich Roll, people who gave me the opportunity to talk on their podcasts about science, and then eventually, we started our own podcast. So to me, it's this like beautiful ecosystem, and I never ever think of myself as like, okay, like I'm here professing to people. I just love being a part of it. I also, just like when I was a kid, I'm crewed up with a bunch of great people, and it's not all guys. Rhonda Patrick too, who, by the way, folks, people always say, who was first man in on public facing science and health education? Not first man, first woman. It was Rhonda. She was the first. Then came Matt Walker, me, some others, right? So I think the community of podcasters also, I feel like, wow, like this is as great as when I discovered neuroscience. And I actually feel more resonance with podcasters, because it's really like of the love. You can't have a podcast that is worth anything in terms of its success or its content unless the person doing it loves that thing.
Right.
Like you can't, it's not journalism, it's not media. I mean, and there's a media component because it's public facing, but it's like you love bow hunting.
Yeah.
You love fitness. You love hammering away every day, right?
Yeah, right.
And so you're basically talking about the things that you would be doing anyway. And so am I, and so is Joe, and so is Lex, and so is Rich, so is Rhonda.
Yeah.
And
we're getting paid for this.
Right, exactly.
I do this for free.
Exactly. So if anyone out there wants to do a podcast or social media, what I would say is make sure that what you talk about is something that you really, truly care about.